Hello, everybody. We are getting ready to start another Backyard Farming Academy workshop today on the top 3 things that are causing your garden to not burst and explode with thriving growth this upcoming spring. So tune in today for the top 3 pro tips on how to make your garden over winter better. We'll be back here in a few moments, right when this thing starts up. Thanks for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Obviously, you guys have a busy life, busy schedule. Your time is valuable. It means a lot that you guys choose to spend some of that time with us. We really appreciate it. And I know that a bunch of you guys are going to continue to join. So want to throw it out there. If you guys miss any of this webinar or are looking for more information about backyard farming or Backyard Farming Academy, go to the links down below or to our social medias, most channels at Backyard Farming Supply. Obviously, with that being said, I'll just give you guys a little introduction of myself while we're waiting on some of the people to join the webinar here. I am Tate Dooley. I'm the head instructor here at Backyard Farming Academy, and I've got an amazing team that I've really got to thank for helping me to bring the first courses for the Backyard Farming Academy to the people. We as backyard farmers, we as environmental stewards, but most importantly, we as parents, husbands, wives, family members, and members of our community really are looking to reconnect with nature. I'm seeing this all over the place right now. I think maybe there's a lot of things going on in the world right now, and I don't want to get on to any of those soapboxes, but a lot of those things are drawing us towards Mother Nature and also reprioritizing some of the core key fundamentals of humanity, like feeding ourselves. At the end of the day, if we can't feed ourselves, I don't care how much money we've got, what type of toys we've got, what type of house we live in, because we're going to ultimately be withering away in the wind. And this is nothing that any of us want. And further, there's a lot of things that are finally coming to light about food, food security, food ingredients, and also food cultivation techniques and methodologies. So a lot of these things are coming to the light. I've been preaching them for 10 to 15, maybe even 20 years on some of these concepts. And now they're actually gone from little known to well known. And that is a huge thing. And a lot of it is because of you guys. So thank you so much. Give yourselves a pat on the back for being messengers for humanity, because it's up to us to share with those around us to really know what's going on in the world. We've got to take a multi-approach, listen to everything, decipher what we want for ourselves, and use what we want for ourselves in our daily life. And I think that one thing that unites all of humanity, and I don't care if it's political, racial, religion, educational, status, career, all of these things people throw by the wayside when we start talking about food. And food is one of the most important. Food is the most important thing to obviously a human's life. If we don't have it, we're not going to survive. It's that simple. So Obviously, here at Backyard Farming Supply, we are all about giving you the knowledge, tools, systems, techniques, and technologies to maximize your food production. That's what it's all about for us. And we really want to be able to be a part of this community and build this community. But guess what, guys? Yes, we're teachers for certain things, but we are students for everything. We want to continue learning until the day we die, because the second that you stop learning and you stop growing and you stop being curious, you start dying and you start withering away in the wind, and that is not anything that any of us want to do. So human nature, it is what it is, and it is good for the awakening that is happening around the topic of food and ingredients right now. So really, really excited to kick off today's webinar. And I'm going to talking about is, there we go. The number one thing that we are talking about is obviously the top 3 pro tips to let your garden overwinter. And a lot of people are like, what is there really to think about? We just let it go through the winter. And you know what? Sometimes that is one of the best strategies, especially if you have a very simple garden. Just let it overwinter. Let's not get too caught up in pre-treating or preparing our garden, especially at the end of a winter, for the next gardening season. And we'll dive a lot further into some of these things and how especially being lazy at the end of the year might actually be better for your garden and allow it to thrive a lot more the next upcoming spring. So it's pretty interesting. I have a couple people chiming in here, so I'm going to send a couple messages. They're looking where the link is and stuff like that. So I'm going to bounce this to them. I appreciate you guys. Hey, we're all people here, right? The best thing about the last few years is we've all come together through digital tools and technology, and we all understand that we're all human. We're all human. We're all human. And at the end of the day, things like this happen, right? We have a limited team here, especially doing the production of Backyard Farming Academy. We got to give them a huge round of applause. They've done an amazing effort and an amazing job at bringing these materials from my mind onto paper, into these webinars, and into the Backyard Farming Academy. Our seed starting blueprint is definitely an ending point for today's lesson. So if you guys are getting curious, you're getting excited, you're like, you know what, the new year is almost here. In my particular zone, I'm getting ready to garden. Winter might have shown you the majority of what it's got to offer. Obviously, we've got January and February left. And most of the United States, January and February is our biggest winter months. But it's always good for us to go into those winter months with perception of what we've got to do for next year. But until we get there and we starting our seeds, we're going to think about some steps that we can take over winter to really maximize our spring. So obviously, we start the winter with winterization and winterizing your plumbing. But we also go into some things that might be good to do during winter that sometimes we kind of miss out on, or sometimes we rush on in spring, like things like soil and water testing. Where is your soil sitting? Have you been re-amending it? Has it gone a few years since it's been re-amended? How do we re-amend it, and what do we re-amend it with to allow it to be a balanced soil food web system and allow our plants to really thrive? How do we nourish our soil, and how do we manage our overwinter crops during the winter? There's got to be a lot of different things that we can do. And ultimately, we want to be able to embrace beneficial bugs, reflect from what we did in the last year, and apply it to the next year. Another cool thing that I'm going to go over is debunking some gardening myths. I had some people at my house yesterday, and they were talking about some garden myths that they are believing that I just simply don't believe are true, that I feel are good topics for the entire community. So we're going to keep on rolling. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is winterizing your plumbing and your systems. This is really, really important. If you don't winterize, you're going to be spending hundreds or maybe even thousands of dollars, as well as a lot more time to reinstall pumps, filters, PVC, irrigation, heads, drippers, and a lot of other things that we can simply mitigate these issues by doing the right winterization steps. So to go through it really quickly, at the end of the year, I actually have probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks of my garden growing where I have nothing turned on. I've winterized my irrigation. I've taken my pumps inside, made sure there's no water inside of them that's going to get nasty over the winter and or crack if they are in my garage and get too cold. And there's also filters. There's simple ways that we can use the standard methods that we apply to our traditional lawn and sprinklers to our high-end vegetable garden by simply setting up the system correctly. So having an air bleed valve that we can hook an air chuck up to, having a place to make sure that we have our valves turned off, that we're going to actually be able to build pressurization in our system, which will allow us to actually evacuate all of the water all the way through the drip head, drip lines, and everything that actually prevents some of the work and gives us an option of leaving our irrigation in its spot over the winter. Instead of moving it and doing all this stuff and storing it, which is obviously a good call, depending on how much sun your garden gets over the winter and how long you want your plumbing to last. But, you know, at the end of the day, my style is different all the time because of what? Life, schedule, timing, family, kids, self, dinner, dishes, laundry. You guys know the drill. We're all humans here. We all put our pants on the same way. And at the end of the day, we want to be able to minimize the amount of work and maximize our results. So proper winterization is very important. Obviously, it gets really specific to you and your system. So if you guys have any questions, have any concerns, have any ideas, feel free to email us at info@backyardfarmingsupply or give us a call at 303-955-7838 to book a VIP call or book a short consultation or just hit us up about a product question or a quick idea. We are here for you guys. We're in your corner. We're here for the backyard farming community. So obviously, like I said, disconnecting, draining all your hoses, faucets, drip lines, hose bibs, and water features is absolutely essential. And I think most of us are pretty familiar with that. If we don't do those things, it's going to cost the most money. Also, pumps, air compressors, and antifreeze solutions. There are ways that we can use, like in my seed starting room, large hydroponic style reservoirs that technically sit outside all winter long below my seed starting room, which was my sunroom previously. And we can actually use those systems even throughout the cold days and the winter. How do we do that? Well, there's a few different ways. Thing number one is if it is a large reservoir, we're going to want to put a heating element into it. Thing number two is we're going to want to treat the plumbing that goes from the water reservoir into our room that might be externally exposed outside. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Once again, feel free to schedule a call if you've got more specific questions about your system. Now, when it comes to PVC and solenoids, I really like to talk about sun damage, but also the little things. Like sometimes we unplug our pump, but we leave our garden brains on. So it's trying to turn on and off the solenoids all winter long, but because there's no pressure behind it via water pressure, it's just putting a whole lot of strain on the solenoid. And ultimately, that's going to have to cause you to replace solenoids the upcoming year. So one simple thing for solenoids is unplugging your brain or your timer throughout the whole winter. I've made the mistake. A lot of these things, actually, guys, people are like, I don't ever want to seem like I'm preaching down to anybody ever, because I've made all of these mistakes and spent the money and figured it out the hard way. And really, that's why we created Backyard Farming Academy and Supply, is so you guys can minimize the hard speed bumps and big checks to write when this stuff goes wrong. So blowing out your system, special care for your PVC and solenoids, little things like blocking them from sun over winter. If your solenoids are also in a place where they receive a lot of sunlight, maybe they're externally exposed, maybe there's not a box over them, you can do little simple things like a bucket or some black and white poly plastic taped onto it to just keep some of the solar load off. The winter sun is really damaging on PVC because of the temperature and those direct rays. And just over time, the amount of accumulation you do just really breaks down your stuff. So obviously, guys, we could go into these things forever with specifics with my system, but it might not apply to everybody. So once again, hit us up if you got any questions. Soil and water testing is a really important wintertime opportunity that we have plenty of time to send our soil and our water off for testing. It can take 2 or 3 weeks at the laboratory, which is oftentimes a little bit less expensive of a soil or a water test. Maybe even we get the results back, we didn't like them. Maybe we feel that it was the lab and we want to try another lab. Now we've got the opportunity to do that. Or maybe we want to test right at the end of the year, do our fall amending program, retest in February or March, see how those nutrients have become available. So there's so many different options that we can look at and we can take into account when we are thinking about soil and water testing over the winter. A lot of times testing options like local labs, soil kits, and online services have many different prices, many different timelines, many different flavors, many different opportunities, and can definitely be also a good, and it can also take a good amount of time to research. So if you guys want to research and really know that you're sending to the best lab, that might take time too. We've got plenty of time over winter. The last thing that we want to do is go and rush into this once our plants are in the ground and we've now got a moving target, because those plants are going to interact with our soil and our water a lot. And a lot of times people are concerned that they've leached nutrients out of their system, or they need to rotate crops, or a lot of different things based upon their garden performance from last year. And this is true, but can be confirmed through soil and water testing. So really, really important. Another thing that we're going to look at is how we can nourish our soil, how we can add nutrients back to our soil. Obviously, in a system like mine, I'm cheating because I'm fertigating literally all day, every day, and adding nutrients back all the time. For you guys who aren't doing that, I would highly recommend it. I always like to say to people, are you hungry 1 or 2 days after Thanksgiving? You are. Even though you ate the most food you've eaten all year, you're still hungry after Thanksgiving, and you're really going to want to look for maybe even a different diet. So a diverse, frequent diet is really, really important for plants to be able to thrive and give you the big yields that you want. A lot of people are always like, dude, how do you get the yields that you get? These plants are vibrant, bursting with fruits and veggies, and just keep on harvesting. Well, it takes energy for a plant to produce a vegetable or a fruit. And if you're constantly giving them the energy that they want through their food, just like us, with a workout program and protein supplements, or an everyday life with a balanced meal, that's really what we're doing with plants. A lot of times people put the fertilizers into their soil only, which is amazing. And I highly recommend doing every single year. But if you're able to add irrigation on top of it, you're really going to see better results. And real quick, while we're sitting here, Natalie Quinn has jumped in and has said, this is the last live was very helpful. And she's interested to see what will be covered today. Thanks for tuning in again, Natalie. Make sure you spread the word with your backyard farming family and friends. Appreciate you tuning in as well. And happy winter solstice. It's going to be a great webinar for sure. And I want to make sure that we get straight to the point because I want you guys to be able to go and enjoy the winter solstice because we're heading back into the light. You know, sometimes these early dark days can get a little bit long or a little bit short, depending on how you want to look at it. But I'm really excited to head back into this upcoming spring. So thanks for the winter solstice vibes. Appreciate it. So when we look at nourishing the soil, there's a few things that we can do really to minimize our effort and maximize our results. And number one is leaving plant roots and debris in place. A lot of people, we rush into winter and we're like, hey, let's pick up all the leaves from the lawn and let's get them all off the beds and let's get all the plants out of the soil and let's make it a nice starting slate for next year. And there's something to that. I love it. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a story. So last year, I had some great friends that did me a huge favor, and I really appreciate it, but I wasn't there. And they came in and they cleared my garden for me. They were like, dude, you're bouncing around. Do you need us to come in and clean your garden and prep it for next year? I was like, you know what? I would love that. I'm literally overseas right now. Thank you. I came back to not what I expected. They had ripped my blueberry plants out of my beds. Unfortunately, I'm not trying to blast anybody, but I was like, whoa, what happened? Literally like full-term plants that are like perennials and or annuals. They stripped everything. They literally stripped everything. I was surprised they didn't pull my apple trees out of the ground. They did that good of a job. I appreciate them. Thank you guys. Not trying to be rude, but it made me wonder because they cleared the cover crop. They cleared the plants, the roots, the stems, got down to literally like bare dirt for the whole winter. And this last spring, not only did we have a really rainy spring, which I thought would have caused my garden to just explode faster, but there wasn't that much sunlight. So that was a huge problem. You can have a lot of rain. Garden loves that. But if you don't have the sun to balance out the rain, now your plants are like, brr, what's going on? So with that being said, I noticed after a clearing of all plant life and biological life in every way, shape, and form, that it took a lot longer for my garden to establish itself this last spring. I was sitting there going, what is going on? It took forever. Like my garden wasn't exploding until the middle of July. Now there was a few things that happened. Like I went out with smaller seedlings than I normally do, and I was tweaking my seed station, and I was gone, like I said, and there was a lot of different variables, but I felt that the number one variable is because I removed all my plants, all the leaves, all the roots, all the cover crop, even if it was dead or alive. I think that it just solar radiated my bed and basically nuked out all the beneficial biology as well as all the beneficial insects. So if we leave our plant debris and roots in place, it helps to retain moisture in the soil, not only because there's roots there and biology there, but also because the plant skeleton and those leaves that have dropped down are shading the soil from solar radiation. It's also locking in. As that stuff gets rained down or snowed down and compacted, it also locks in the beneficial nutrients and the beneficial soil, as well as biology, microbial and fungal, for our soil system. And that's really, really important for us to think about. At the end of the day, this is really what organic gardening is all about, is establishing that soil food web. So this year, I took it to the exact opposite level. And I did nothing. I literally did absolutely nothing. I left my trellis in place. I left my shade cloth, my plants, my leaves that fell out of the trees into the bed, even onto my rocks as well as my lawn. Now, that's going to suck to clean up in early spring because there is a time for us to come back along and clear the slate as much as we can, or to amend that slate into our soil to allow it to work with our soil system better. So there is a couple things that we're going to want to do as spring approaches. We'll do another webinar on that in the future. Once again, if you guys are curious, you're like, hey, I've got some questions, hit up info@backyardfarmingsupply.com. Give us a call, throw us a DM on the socials, or feel free to schedule a VIP call or session with us. This all goes back to what I was just talking about, like understanding the microbiology. It takes a good amount of time for these microbiological communities to build up and establish themselves. Therefore, breaking down the nutrients and making that available, that's another timeline process. So between those two processes, if you eliminate your soil biology, which now isn't making the nutrients more available, you've got to start there in spring. Well, I'd rather allow my overwinter processes and methods and techniques to allow that process to happen all winter long, so that hopefully when we plant and go to garden the upcoming year, we are ready to rock and roll, and those things are already established and our garden thrives much quicker. I wish that I would have done some type of timeline measurement or time study upon this last year. I could potentially even do it just going back through photo and video and kind of analyzing based upon what I remember and the date stamps of the photos and videos. But it was probably 4 to 6 weeks of thriving, explosive growth that I lost because of minimized soil biology and minimized beneficial bug and environmental mother nature soil food web characteristics. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So whether it's leaves, sticks, stems, plants, roots, microbes will break down dead plant material and begin to compost or mulch them, optimizing your soil moisture. So don't clean up all your leaves. Leave them in place. Bring back lazy gardening over winter, and I think it will help you out a lot more. Winter water management is another thing that's really, really important. Obviously, we've got our initial reservoir care, like emptying stuff. Do we have rain collection? Are we going to be headed into a nasty winter? Are we going to get a lot of freezes? All of these things need to be taken in place. And even if we go one way, we always need to have a plan B. Hey, I think we'll be good. I think we're through the bulk of the winter. Boom, a snowstorm hits. One thing that you can count on with Mother Nature and with farming in general is that she's going to throw you for a loop. She's going to give you some things that you didn't expect. And ultimately, this is what makes farming probably the most difficult thing to do. Or one of the most difficult thing about farming is the fact that Mother Nature will continue to throw curveballs at you. So really quick, we've got some people jumping in. And what's up, man? How you doing? What's up, Zone Work? Appreciate you showing up. We got our Key to Life Supply team in the house. Excited for another webinar. I'm really excited too. Thanks for joining today, team. Appreciate it. So obviously, jumping back into it, with winter water management, we've got a reservoir care and all of those things. It kind of goes into winterization a little bit, but also we do have another thing that we've got to consider. What are our alternate watering solutions? Do we have garlic, flower bulbs, brassicas, onions? Do we have overwintering crops that maybe we get a really dry winter? Maybe we did over clear our garden and some of those things aren't thriving like they should because they are getting blasted with sun, drying out, and ultimately running out of moisture to allow them to overwinter really well. Well, this is definitely a thing I've ran into as well. So I always like to have in all my gardens, even though I rarely use them, a watering can on hand, or have an easy, simple way that I can reconnect my hose back to my house on a nice day and just do some winter watering, especially like right after a storm, maybe in the middle of a really nice week when we've seen a couple nice days. There's not a bunch of snow and frozenness happening with our beds, but we've got a bunch of nice days after, so it's not going to freeze the water into the soil. Now, with that being said, might as well freeze the water into the soil too. This is another thing that's beautiful. There's so many things to do and so many different ways to garden. There's not really a right or a wrong way. And that's what I like about it. We can all learn from everybody at every level in every system all the time. Absolutely love it. So we've got some other winter growing strategies that we want to talk about. Like we just said, do we need to water our garden in the winter? Do we want to freeze the water into the soil because we just don't have that much water on hand? Maybe we're working with limited water. Maybe we're on a well. Maybe we're in a climate that has water restrictions. A lot of different things going on. So no one farming solution fits everybody. That's for sure. So with fall and winter bulb planting options like onion, garlic, and early brassicas, like we talked about, you might want to add some fertility to those things. The more we fertilize them, the better they're going to overwinter. It's a lot of times people ask me, and as temperatures heat up, do I slow down feeding my garden? No, you speed up feeding your garden, and you maybe even feed it more during the summer. Well, in the winter, do you slow down feeding your plants? Feeding, probably not, but you slow down the frequency of irrigation and fertigation. So you've got a lot of nutrients available, but because brassicas don't consume the high levels of water like vegetables or fruits do, we're going to be able to make that water last a lot longer. We're going to keep a little bit more nutrients in the soil because the less water uptake we have, the less nutrient uptake we have. But it depends on the crop type. Things like brassicas take up a lot of nitrogen. So we're going to want to make sure that we've got nitrogen fixing winter cover crops in place to minimize our fertility needs and give us another winter growing strategy. Watering cans or portable sprayers and or essential nutrients for winter cover crops are all really, really important things. And if you plan on doing some winter gardening, you might want to end your summer season or your fall season with a little bit more amending. Now, if you're doing a winter crop, if you're in a California region, I would say that this would be a great, Arizona, New Mexico, this is a great thing to do because you guys can actually get more growing cycles than I can here in Colorado. I'm jealous. So post some comments down below on your favorite winter growing crops and some things that you've done to them to allow them not only to explode over winter, boost your harvest, but also to allow your garden for the next year to thrive and explode that much more. We've got to embrace our beneficial bugs, guys. And ultimately, I think that one of the best things about some of these techniques we've discussed today is it's most impactful to your beneficial biology and beneficial bugs on your property. I think that a lot of times when we clear our garden to the max, those next years are when we see the worst bad bug pressure. Now, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to bring you guys along for the adventure this year. But I think the more that we leave the natural elements in place, we leave the chances for the beneficial bugs that we've established, whether we bought ladybugs or Persimmilus or Californicus or Hypoaspis miles beneficial bugs, plant soil or deep soil bugs, I think that they're all going to have a lot better chance of surviving and reestablishing the less we mess with our garden at the end of the year. So, building bug diversity is really important for controlling future pest and disease issues, as well as maximizing your healthy soil food web and ecosystem. Another thing that we can do is this is an opportunity for us to say, what bad bugs did we have last year? Because if we did have an aphid pest pressure or a russet mite or a spider mite pest pressure, now we know what types of beneficial plants or overwinter techniques we need to apply specifically to combat that bad bug. And a lot of times we're going to look at the opposite. We're going to look at the beneficial bug that is the biggest predator for that bad bug, the beneficial bacteria or fungi that create a bad environment for the larva or insect in general. What type of companion plants host those beneficial bugs to keep the bad ones away? It's really a multifaceted moving target system that we need to constantly be aware of. And there's a couple things that go into this that you guys might not know. Sometimes you're like, why certain years do I have worse aphid pressure or russet mite pressure than other years? Well, it's actually because of seasonality, temperature, environment, humidity, neighbor property management techniques, but also our local United States Department of Agriculture's. For example, in certain years, they will release things like russet mites to control invasive species of plants. They literally send them out to kill plants, but in the process, they get picked up by a weed and blown into your yard, or a leaf, or a dog, or a cat, or somebody's shoes, or somebody's shirt or pants. And now you've got the issue too. And you didn't know you were going to have the issue. So sometimes it's also smart just to get ahead of it and look at what is going to be released by the USDA in your specific state to control invasive plants, invasive bugs, invasive bacteria, biology. There's a lot of different things that they release for a lot of different reasons. And we can get ahead of this by just simply referencing those United States Department of Agriculture's, getting ahead of it and preparing through companion plants, soil biology, soil food web, as well as beneficial insects that maybe we even want to introduce to plant dead plant systems or soil systems over the winter. A lot of different things we can do. Once again, guys, if you guys have more questions, hit us up, send us an email, leave us a comment down below. We are here for you. We want to bring you food security. Why? For the future generations. Our future generations are the most important thing that we've got. Not only because I have kids that I love more than pretty much anything on the planet, other than my wife, but at the end of the day, we got to make sure that we leave them a better planet than we inherited. Because just like Ralph Waldo Emerson, we did not inherit the planet from our parents, but we are borrowing it from our children. And I think that once we really start to embrace that, we can really resonate with that and give them a better future. So reflecting and learning about our garden, our family, what was eaten. Hey, the kids just really didn't like this. What grew really well in the garden? My garden exploded with peppers. What didn't do so well? This last year just wasn't as good of a tomato year as normal. Well, those are really important things for us to think about during the winter. Actually take to our garden map and our garden plan. And if you don't have one, hit us up. Once again, we've got some good pro tips and info tools for you guys, as well as we've got some calendars and some ebooks that can really help you guys with some of these things. So throw it down below. But what did we learn? Well, I'm going to give you guys a couple examples from my garden. One thing that I learned this last year is to not overclear your garden in the winter, because it'll slow down your upcoming spring establishing biology and insects. That was the number one thing that I learned this last year. Number two is importance of being able to transplant and harden your seedlings. I got to a position, I grew 1,200 seedlings in my seedling station, but I didn't have enough room to transplant all of them. And I was so busy building gardens, helping community members, traveling, doing the work that I do, that sometimes your own stuff gets neglected. And so it's all about having your system able to take the next step fast, effective, and optimally. Because like transplanting, this next year, one thing that I'm going to implement is actually an outdoor area that has a roof covering, so I don't have to worry about it getting hailed on, because it's always that time of year that you're getting your hail, right when you're trying to go outside, right when you're hardening your plants. That's the hail season, especially here in Colorado. So that's one of the variables that I've got to deal with. So I'm literally going to build a baby A-frame roof structure that's completely open air with 1 or 2 2-foot by 4-foot racks on it that will have enough room so that I'm like, okay, transplant inside my bedroom, harden it with some bigger lights that will get it a little bit more used to the solar radiation of the sun. Boom, bring it outside, let it sit there for a week in the same pot and container that it finished its seeding stage or its vegetative stage before it goes into the bed or the vertical grow tower or the bean tunnel or whatever. Let it sit outside. Let it go through some of those hot days, those cold nights, some of those extreme temperature and environmental factors, because then, boom, it's going to explode a lot more. And it also gives you the opportunity, maybe it's not time for it to go out there yet. Let's bring it back inside. Now you haven't like fully contaminated it by getting it down in the ground and into a garden feature, garden bed style scenario. And you've got it kind of exposed to the elements. But other than that, it's in the same tray, it's in the same pot, it's in the same everything. So we can quickly move it back to where we want to grow. And so with that being said, Seth Harcrow just jumped in here and he's asking, is it too early to start seeds? Seth, if you mean right now to start seeds, it really depends on your environment and your zone and also your setup. So if you're in a state that doesn't have a hard winter, like let's say California or Florida, or maybe even parts of Texas, some parts of Oklahoma, however, most of Oklahoma gets a pretty gnarly winter. It really depends. If you're in one of those, zone 7 through zone 11 environments, hey, right there, Sue Warwick, right as I said zone 7, says, what about zone 7? Well, Sue, depending on the winter. Now, disclaimer, and Mother Nature throws curves at us. But I always like to say, in an environment like a 7 to 11, you could start seeds November 1st if you really wanted to. And it all goes to what I was just talking about. If you have the room and space to transplant them and let them get bigger, I'm a fan of having the biggest, most awesome plants possible going into the beds in the early spring and summer. How do we do that? We give them more time than less. So if you've got a seed starting station set up and the ability in that seed starting station to go ahead and veg your seeds, just like Seth, I would recommend the earlier the better, especially with things like peppers. Peppers are the and some of your brassicas are the number one thing that need extra time in the veg room. If you start a tomato and a pepper at the same time, your tomatoes are going to be 2, 3, 4 times the size of your peppers. So peppers, start your seeds early. I'm going to be starting for here in zone 5B in Colorado. I'm going to be starting my pepper seeds at the end of January. So what does that mean? Do I wait until the end of January to be like, oh, blah, blah, blah. What about my environment? Oh, crap. I need to get a better grow light. Oh, my gosh. What's a reservoir? What type of nutrients do I need? Oh, I forgot a pH pen. Nope. We start doing all that now. And if you're curious how to get ahead of that, check out the seed starting blueprint in the link down below or over at byf.academy to give yourself a fully comprehensive guide on how to start your seeds better for this upcoming year. The timing, the who, what, when, where, why, how, pro tips, the equipment, the tools, the techniques, the procedures, and the locations to get your seeds out. So we appreciate the question. Perfect question. Perfectly timed too. So thank you, Sue. Appreciate it. There's a lot of things that I reflected on and learned this last year. Another one is shade cloth. Hail cloth, I like to call it here in Colorado. It's not even for the shade, it's for the hail. And this is a timing thing. When do you put it on? When do you take it off? I ended up leaving mine all year this last year, even though we had hail all the months. So it was needed. But it slowed down my tomato growth. Tomatoes like the maximum amount of sunlight, but they're under a shade cloth, or in this case, a hail cloth. So how do we maximize that? Do we use a black cloth or do we use a white cloth? A white cloth will let through more light. Is it actual usable light or is it just brightness? Probably both. But, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that we can do and a lot of ways that we can optimize our system to give us better results throughout the year. Stay tuning in. There's a lot more on that topic in all of our webinars, as well as over at our YouTube channel. Remember this, to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. And I think right now, one of the main things that we as Americans need is to believe in a better tomorrow. So start getting your seeds, start prepping your seed starting station, start talking to your community on what problems they ran into last year, start brainstorming on what problems you ran into last year, start creating your garden plan for the next year because the gardening season is not far away. It's right around the corner and we look forward to it. So with that being said, how do we get ready for spring for 2024? And we are going, Sue actually just asked, what about protecting poinsettias? Really depends. Are they in a pot and in a container? They're in a container, like my blueberries right now are in my seed starting station. So I brought them from outside back to inside because blueberries are going to be growing throughout multiple seasons. I didn't want to leave them outside in my garden bed where they're going to get frozen off and potentially killed by my buddies trying to help me. So I put them all in containers so I can bring them in and outdoors. I would recommend the same for poinsettias or flowers. If they're not in that scenario, you can do kind of like what you see here in the background. You can put up a support structure, and then you could put some type of snow shield or rain shield or hail shield or a makeshift hoop house, greenhouse style scenario with plastic to really help some of your flowers to overwinter better as well. And I've seen all of that done. You could put a bucket over it if it's outside in a bed. You could put a bucket with a hole cut out with some plastic right there so it gets sunlight. There's a lot of different things that we can do. Ultimately, depends on what your winter is doing to you, what setup you have in your garden, and what plants you've got. So I am in favor here in Colorado of putting things into containers that are going to be going over winter, unless it's things like onions or garlic or flower bulbs. I just let Mother Nature take its course with those. I hope that answered your question, Sue. What type of garden are you planting? This is one of the first things that we've got to consider. Did last year we grow a flower garden and we saw what's happening at grocery stores and shelves and on the news and about our food? And now we want to switch our flower garden to a fruit and vegetable garden? That's something very important to think about. Last year, did we grow too many fruits and vegetables and we need more leafy greens? There's another way we can think about it. Did last year we not take advantage of the vertical space that we've got? There's so many different factors. And once again, throw us a call, leave us a comment, send us an email at info@backyardfarmingsupply.com, or leave a comment, or jump onto the webinar and get your question answered live like Sue is doing. So we appreciate you, Sue. Go and tell your friends. Jump into the Backyard Farming Academy Facebook group. And we're here for you guys. We're in your corner. So where will it go? Where will my garden go? Where will the food go? Where will my features go? Where will my inputs and my outputs of my backyard farm go? It's really, really important for us to think about. This last year was the best year I've ever done to use all of my harvest. I've had other years where I produced like tomatoes. I did a good job with tomatoes this year, even though it was a weird tomato year. We still had a pretty good yield. I've had other years that was like times 10x, and the yields were jaw-dropping, and people were like, holy crap, dude, how many tomatoes did you grow this year? I had a year that I grew over 2,000 pounds of tomatoes here in my backyard farm, which is only a quarter acre. And I've got a house, a 3,000 square foot house on that quarter acre, and a driveway. So it's kind of nuts. But at the end of the day, what did I do with all those tomatoes? Did I have the system to be able to handle that, prep it, cook it, freeze it, and store it? I did not. So a lot of it went to waste. That year, I probably threw away 30% of my tomatoes because I just simply was not set up to handle that type of volume. So this is another thing that we can be doing over the winter season, is thinking about, maybe even has nothing to do with our garden itself, but has everything to do with our food, our pre and post harvesting, our outdoor washing station, our freezer, our kitchen, and our amount of cooking time that we have, because those are really important. This last year, I literally cooked for almost 2 months straight. No joke. You guys can go check it out. You probably were like, where is the content for Backyard Farming Supply throughout September, October, or November? Well, I was cooking the whole time, literally 10 to 20 meals a day, sometimes for 2 months straight. So my biggest optimization that I did last year was prepping for harvesting, and I'm going to put another emphasis on that. How do I handle that much food? Even though I was really stoked, this last year I had less than 1% of my harvest that went to waste, versus the year before, probably 30% of my tomatoes and 10% of my peppers and 20 to 40% of my squash. Squash is always the hard one. This year I had no thrown away squash. That was awesome. I have frozen squash that's already been cooked, smoked, seasoned, and ready to rock and roll in my freezer now for a while. Actually, I'm going to bust some of it out tonight now that I'm thinking about it. So what plants will you grow? What plants did you grow too much of last year? What did you grow not enough of last year? What were surprising favorites? Like, for instance, the Melanzane Rosa di Rotonda. I hope I got that right. I'm pulling this out of thin air right now. The Turkish red eggplant was an amazing surprise in my garden. Tastes like a pepper / eggplant, looks like a tomato, yielded better than any eggplant I've ever grown. That's a keeper. There's another thing. What are the keepers? What were your favorite things? So, how much time did you spend on certain activities in your garden? Did you spend all your time weeding? That might tell you to do a better job of laying down cover crop earlier. Did your weeds overtake your garden? That might tell you to grow your seedlings and start your seedlings earlier on in the year so that you can maximize your plant size. So when it goes out, it instantly overshades all those weeds and ultimately has a competitive advantage for other competing plants. Did you have the tools? What tools were you missing? Were you missing the seed starting station in of itself altogether? Or are you missing better lights, better pH pens, better nutrients, better equipment and tools in general? So, at the end of the day, there's hundreds of them. I'm finally getting to this point, and I want to throw it out there for you guys. So one of the biggest things that you guys get by being a part of the Backyard Farming Academy, as well as Backyard Farming Supply and tuning in, is 20 years of doing this. Even me, I'm finally getting to the point that I'm like doing 1 to 2% tweaks instead of 10 to 20% tweaks to my system, let alone 100% whole revamps to the entire backyard farm. We really want to be able to use our winter to maximize our system. And at the end of the day, that's what we bring, is a backyard farming system. It's not just a garden bed. It's not just soil. It's not just seeds. It's not just a harvesting station. It's not just an outdoor kitchen. It's not just freezing spots in the garage to store it throughout the winter. It's not just any of those. It's all of it. It's the combination of a seed starting system and 10 different types of garden features to grow specific types of plants to maximize harvest, minimize harvesting efforts, but also to rebuild our soil food web system, maximize our plant and garden's relationship with itself to give us the best results possible. So it's a huge thing. And we're coming up to about 5 on the hour. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for about 55 minutes now. Really appreciate it. I'm seeing comments on the Instagram posts and comments on the Facebook and questions in the Backyard Farming Academy Facebook group. Really appreciate your guys' engagement. At the end of the day, we're doing this to build a community. We're building this so that we can be ready for 2024 and we can be ready to feed our families. So with that being said, how are we ready to garden for this upcoming year? Well, seed ordering and planning is obviously most important. Using what we loved and what we didn't love in the garden itself from last year and planting more or less of those things. It's really important. What are things, cousins or sisters or brothers to those particular plants that you wanted to grow? And now that you've grown the entry point, now let's dive further into that obsession. One of them for me that you guys saw is crazy looking squash. I loved growing wild looking squash that are just extremely unique. And some of them I didn't even eat. I'll be honest. It was just something new and fun to cultivate versus things like the Puma pepper. Who's grown the Puma pepper? Throw a comment down below. That thing was an absolute roller coaster ride. I have never grown a pepper that started florally, then went sweet, then went spicy, back to florally, back to a hybrid combo of all three, back to super sweet, back to only spicy for 15, 20 minutes. It was wild. There were 90-second periods that I was like, wow, that's the most florally, flowery tasting pepper I've ever eaten. To 90 seconds of period of time going, oh my gosh, that thing is a rocket ship. I am blown away. So all of these things can aid really into our seed ordering and planning, and our seed ordering and planning really goes into our garden layout and design. If we want to grow a lot of beans, build a bean tunnel. Who doesn't like walking through a tunnel with 100 types of beans that you can pick the beans like this? You don't have to get down on your knees and bend your back and lean over something awkward and put a bunch of strain on yourself, and also put the beans down where squirrels can eat them easier and rabbits and everything else. build the system specifically for the type of plant that you're trying to grow with a proper garden layout and design. Maybe you don't know the garden layout and design. Hit us up. That's what we specialize in. We have over 12 different types of feature here at our backyard farm to maximize crop type. Makes life easy. And some additional pro tips that we've got is general, like kind of basics of what we've gone over today. Look at your soil amendments. Look at your NPKs. Look at your micro and macronutrition. Look at the crops. Look at the companion plants. Look at the beneficial insects. Look at your seed starting station with a Sherlock Holmes eye. What did you do wrong? Be critical of yourself. Critically think. I think that if society in general needs to critically think a little bit more, and I think that a lot of our issues would go away. Be critical of ourselves, be critical of our system, and ultimately put that microscope onto what we're doing. See the detail, because the devil's in the details. And we really want to maximize our garden every year. If we're not getting better, then we're getting worse. And I'm here to get better, and I'm here to help you guys get better through Backyard Farming Academy and Backyard Farming Supply. We really appreciate you guys tuning in today, and we're going to save debunking garden myths for maybe a whole nother webinar, because one that I heard yesterday is that you can't plant multiple types of pepper next to each other. It's just simply not true. I proved it this year. I did 80 types of pepper right next to each other, and it was awesome. They were all completely different. They had all completely different flavors, completely different looks, growth, structures, colors of leaves. So we're going to come back and we're going to revisit debunking garden myths for next week's webinar. If you guys have got a couple, bring them to the table, email us, shoot a comment, go to the socials, chime in, and we really appreciate you guys tuning in to this week's. We really appreciate you guys tuning in this week to the Backyard Farming Academy and our weekly webinars. These are for you guys. And if you guys could do us a huge favor, hit that like, subscribe, and comment button. It really helps us in our YouTube algorithm to let other people that want to know about things like gardening so that our videos show up in their algorithms. We appreciate the love and support. I'm Tate Dooley. We'll see you on the next webinar next Thursday. Spread the word. Bring your questions to the table. We look forward to seeing you. Keep it growing. Have a good day.